Within my work, it is possible to say that I did not challenge the genre coded conventions as much as I conformed to them. I think it is possible to say that this is natural, given that you want to ensure that your consumer will be able to understand and decode the genre of your film. However, on the odd occasion, I did challenge genre conventions in order to ensure that my text was not predictable. Steve Neal came up with a theory called difference and repetition in genre, in which he suggested that difference within a genre is important, given that it allows a text to not be boring and predictable for consumers. Therefore, here I will show how I've applied what Steve Neal said in order to challenge some genre conventions and create a unique product that was conventional but also ensure my product was not boring or predictable for consumers, thus meaning that they are more likely to engage within my product with excitement. Laura Mulvey came up with the concept of the male gaze, in which she suggested that consumers are forced to look at media products through the eyes of a heterosexual man, given that the media objectifies women and positions them as sexual objects through the camera lens. However, I did not conform to this stereotypical representation of women, given that I wanted to represent Bee's vulnerability. Here you can see within this footage from my trailer the way in which Bee is wearing a long-sleeved black top ensures that all her body is covered. This therefore does not represent her through her sexuality, but instead places emphasis on her vulnerability as she feels the need to cover her body and hide herself. You can also see through the way in which we captured Bee within the bath that we used a close-up, meaning that none of her body could be seen. This meant that we did not place emphasis on her sexuality, but instead places emphasis on her emotions and vulnerability. This therefore shows how even though within a bath scene where you would probably expect to find women being objectified, we did not objectify Bee, given that we wanted to represent her vulnerability. This therefore demonstrates the way in which we did not conform to the male gaze, thus showing how I was able to break genre conventions in order to make my text slightly different and therefore unique for consumers. Another way in which we challenge representation conventions was through what John Berger said. He said that men act and women appear. He said that women are there to be looked at on screen and are often given passive roles. However, we wanted to challenge this by showing that our central protagonist was active and that she was actively trying to stop her hallucinations, whereby she saw Justin, her boyfriend, trying to kill her. You can see via this action code whereby Bee picks up the knife from her bedside table that she is actively taking charge and a role within the narrative. She is choosing to pick up the knife in order to stab Justin and stop the hallucinations that she is having. The way in which she actively does this herself helps to show how we have challenged what John Berger said, given that we are not presenting women as passive, but presenting our central protagonist to have an active role as she seeks to solve the problem and sort it out herself. This therefore shows another subtle way in which we have challenged stereotypical representations of women in order to make our narrative more exciting. This is another example of an action shot which we use within our trailer that helps to show that our protagonist is not passive, but instead active. The way in which she is running down the street shows she's actively taking a role within the narrative, given that she is running away from her problems and not just passively sitting there. This therefore shows how we challenge what John Berger said, given that we did not just present Bee to be a woman to look at on screen, but instead presented her to be an active woman who was taking a lead role within our narrative. Another way in which Steve Neal said genre conventions could be challenged was through things like mise-en-scène features. We used the mise-en-scène features within our trailer mostly to conform to the conventions of the genre. However, there was one exception of this. Fake blood is normally a mise-en-scène makeup feature that belongs to the horror genre, given that it is associated with gore. However, we used this within our trailer, showing how we did not conform to the genre conventions completely. However, the fake blood within our trailer still helped create a naturalistic and believable setting, thus meaning that it worked well within our trailer. This therefore shows how I did challenge the genre conventions through my use of mise-en-scène features which were more conventional to another genre. This links to what David Buckingham said, given that he suggested genre is in a state of negotiation and change. This therefore means that genre conventions no longer apply, and genre conventions are blurring. Therefore, the way in which I use the genre convention of fake blood, which is stereotypically associated within the horror genre, was not necessarily a bad thing, but instead helped to show my awareness for a modern outlook on genre. Here you can see how I have challenged some conventions in order to provide difference within my trailer, like Steve Neal suggested. Although I have not challenged many, it shows how I was able to challenge a few genre conventions and representation conventions in order to make my trailer more exciting. This demonstrates how I was able to make my product more unique to those other ones on the market, thus ensuring that my consumer would pay interest in my product and thus help my product to be more successful within the industry. However, I did not challenge that many genre conventions, given that from research I had conducted, and like Steve Neal said, these genre conventions only needed to be subtle but were vital within the industry. This therefore demonstrates how I have applied my understanding and awareness for genre in order to get a good balance between the genre conventions that I conform to and the genre conventions that I challenge.